Hi there. We just came from Parshas Pora Duma, and it's called Chukas. It's called an inexplicable teaching of the Torah. It's something that we cannot understand. And why is it something we cannot understand? So the general interpretation, and it's the traditional interpretation, and therefore it is true, is that the Para Duma is used in the process of purifying, of making people who are prohibited permitted, purifying those who are impure, while at the same time those engaged in the process become impure themselves. And this is inexplicable. If it makes people who are impure pure, why should it cause impurity on those who administer the purity? So this reminds me of a little story that happened to me while I was in an airport. I met a man with a long beard from Buenos Aires. I hope he sees the video. I hope he decides to argue with me. And we talked about the various communities. His community is in Buenos Aires, in Argentina. And some of the people that I know from Argentina that are Lubavitchers, he knew. But he had a lot of criticism for them. His main criticism was directed against the process which we Lubavitchers call mivtzoyim. Mivtzoyim means actions, almost like military actions, but they're spiritual actions, activities directed toward affecting people, changing people for the better, at least in our perspective, of course. Uh, I'm not going to change your mind directly. It's up to you. But in our terms, the purpose of the mivtzoyim is to get people to do things that are holy, wholesome, exciting, things that make them feel more Jewish, and that they can share with their families and their friends afterwards. And I was among the first to engage in that process in 1967. The Lubavitcher Rebbe said that we should engage in what is called Mivtza Tefillin, into getting people to put on tefillin all over the world. And in Kfar Chabad, there was an effort. We went, the young men, the married men, took some of us single guys for Shabbos after the 6-day war, that we should go and talk about tefillin in the synagogues. And I went as well, and I spoke in Yiddish. I couldn't speak Ivrit. And I spoke in a big shul in Tel Aviv. Our job was to get people to become aware of the necessity to put on tefillin on a daily basis, to get others to do as well. So we boys were sitting around the table, 4 of us. Besides myself, there was Yekutil Rab Zichrein Levroche. If I was a Misnagid, I'd say Zechet Tzadik Levroche. He was a holy Jew. David Teichtel and David Nachshon. Of course, everybody knows David Nachshon, the patriot, and everybody remembers Kuti Rab, the Mashgiach, and David Teichtel, the Mashpia of Yerushalayim, of Shikun Chabad. And they asked, we talked, what should we do? So I gave a suggestion. I said, look, they give us an extra hour to sleep during the summertime. So there were no air conditioners in those days in all of the yeshivas in Eretz Yisrael. So because the summer is very hot in Israel, there's no air conditioning. So the custom of the yeshivas was that during the summer, they would give the boys an extra hour to sleep, so that they could learn an extra hour later at night. That was the Seder in all the yeshivas in Eretz Yisrael, including Kfar Chabad. So we had 2 hours, 1 hour for lunch and another hour to sleep in the heat. So I said, look, we don't sleep anyway. That's the fact. Why don't we just get on a train that goes from Kfar Chabad to Ramle? It's a 20-minute train ride. We'll put on tefillin with as many people as we can, get on the other side for a few cents, buy a ticket back to Kfar Chabad, and we'll go there and back, and we'll have 40 minutes to put on tefillin with people. And we did. We put on tefillin with a few people. Nachshon saw that it was a good thing. So he told me the next morning, says, why don't we go to Dizengoff? Dizengoff was a major residential area in the heart of Tel Aviv, where all the Salto V'Shamno, all the nomenclatura live, and we'll set up shop over there. I don't know where we set up shop. We set up shop in an alleyway. There might have been a synagogue there, or some other thing, and we put our tefillin on the side. Nachshon was the one on the outside. I was the one on the inside. And sure enough, some people put on tefillin, and the reporters somehow or other found out about it, took pictures of us, and took pictures of us over Shabbos. They had Nachshon, they had me, and they had the people putting on tefillin. And the next week, the entire yeshiva cleared out to do mivtzoyim all over Tel Aviv. And that was the end of, by the way, our Shabbos, Erev Shabbos bathing jaunt. We used to go to Bat Yam to the men's only beach, and that was the last time the boys in Kfar Chabad went. From that time on, 58 years later, 57 and a half years later, they're no longer going to Bat Yam. It's all our fault, our collective faults, the 4 guys that started this whole Mivtzoyim business in Eretz Yisrael, Kfar Chabad. And I know at the same time, simultaneously, there was Mivtzoyim going on in Paris and in England and in New York. I don't claim any, but in Eretz Yisrael, that's how it started with the Bachur. So this Rosh Hashiva, started spewing anger and vile against the boys going on Mivtzoyim. They go out and they give candles to women and to girls, and those girls and women are not dressed properly, and it destroys the purity of the eyes of the boys. And the boys aren't learning at the time. They're doing other things. Instead of learning, they should become Gedolei Torah, and it's taking away hours on time of learning. Besides the fact that this is outside the Seder, besides the fact that his boys, if they were in Eretz Yisrael, would be going to Bat Yam, the boys of the Yeshiva Gedolah here in Detroit go to the various restaurants and lick ice cream cones or ice cream pops, ice pops, and buy all kinds of danishes and donuts and so on, and eat it on the road, on the street, during this time that our boys are going on Mivtzoyim. And besides that there's a time for relaxation that we use for Mivtzoyim, and for us it's a spiritual relaxation. Besides that doesn't take away from the Gedolim, those who are going to become Gedolim b'Torah. But I can attest to you, I've never seen a Bacher get spoiled spiritually by going on Mivtzoyim. I have seen boys who learned in yeshiva and were persuaded by the Yetzer Hara to do other things. So don't tell me that going on Mivtzoyim is the cause of the spiritual decadence of young people. I've never seen young people become decadent as a result of Mivtzoyim. I have seen people who learn Torah and have the Yetzer Haras, and they became decadent on their own, without Mivtzoyim. But anyway, that was the story. So what does it mean? It means as follows. The boys are going out to help others, to purify them, going out into people who have lost, to a certain degree, lost their way, Jewish-wise. They forgot their identity. These boys, the Friday boys, go out and they knock on doors, And they say, ask, are you Jewish? And they waken the Pintal Yid, the Jew, within thousands and thousands of people, tens of thousands of people, every Erev Shabbos. In the course of time, this has affected millions. According to the Pew survey, 37% of the Jewish people in the world, their first connection with Yiddishkeit was Chabad, the Friday Boys, or the Shluchim. But this is what happens. We go out, our children go out, our grandchildren go out, and knock on doors, give out literature, and sometimes there's a woman that's improperly dressed according to halacha. So that, even if one learns not to look, it still is a descent spiritually. And when you descend spiritually, you have to have tefillah and a mikveh. You have to become purified. But the purpose of that is the purification of Klal Yisrael. So the process may require you to be in places that aren't as holy as the Beis Medrash. But nobody ever stopped doing the things necessary for the Parah Aduma, for the purification of Klal Yisrael before the Chag, and nobody in Lubavitch has ever stopped Mivtzoyim, based upon the fact that they have to go in places where the population isn't as careful in their dress as they should be. So that causes a descent temporarily, and therefore there has to be a purification. But trust me that nobody who went to purify Klal Yisrael with the ashes of the Parah Aduma ever regretted doing it, despite the fact that they were tamei until the evening. I know no young people who ever regretted going on Mivtzoyim. It's exciting, not only exciting, but you see the changes that you've impacted on people. So this is the general statement of why this is a chukah, that it's contradictory. It makes pure those who are impure and makes impure those who are pure involved in this. And so I've laid out to you that it's possible to understand this. It's normal. Being involved with people who are not careful with the way they act causes an effect on a pure person whose total immersion is in the Dalet Amos and the 4 L's of Torah. The realities of the street outside are not the realities of the yeshiva, and vice versa. So we can understand it, that that's what happens. So there has to be something deeper. So I realized it after contemplating an answer to my niece, who asked me a question. It was a hard question to answer. I thought I answered it properly, but apparently I didn't. So I'm going to give it a try now on the video. The Bibas boys were aged 4 and 9 months. They were strangled to death, viciously, can't even say by animals, by 2-legged thugs in the name of Allah, in the name of their God. Proud of what they did, murdering Jewish children, and they broke their bones afterwards to try to say that they were killed in a bombing raid. So I was asked, the children of the Bibases, what did they feel? Obviously they felt horrific, frightened, violated, not understanding why there is anger at them. But what happens to their souls? Do their souls realize what happens? Yes, the soul realized what happened. But to the soul, the death on this earth, because one is Jewish, is an act of Kiddush Hashem, self-sacrifice for the sake of God, even though they had no intent of self-sacrifice, but because they were killed in the name of God, because they're Jewish. So to them, this was a great tikkun of their souls. I'm not going to go into what happened in a previous life and maybe something. That is irrelevant. That, first of all, I don't know. No, nobody can know. And secondly, the ways of God are mysterious. We do not understand why. But clearly, the souls of the Bibas children are alive. How do I know they're alive? Maybe that's the end. There's only this world, which is probably what's gnawing at my niece's heart. We don't know. We don't see. There's a book by Yocheved Rigler I suggest everybody read, but there are a lot of books about these things. A lot of people have discovered these things that I'm about to say. People in this world are recycled souls. They come from past lives. And they have to live this world for a tikkun, to correct something. The tikkun doesn't mean they have to correct a sin. Tikkun means that they have to perform the mitzvahs of the Torah. And they stay, and they come again and again till the tikkun is performed. A Jew who dies al Kiddush Hashem is murdered because he's Jewish. There is no greater or higher level of spiritual devotion that comes close to this. Person who's murdered because of his Jewishness sanctifies God's name and brings a tikkun, a correction to the world. And that soul is elevated far beyond what a soul could do normally in a lifetime. The Bibas children were elevated to a level that we can't even comprehend. If they came back because they were cut short in their life, they're on a much higher level than most of us, maybe than all of us. But they come back as pure souls, bringing goodness and kindness into the world. This book by Yocheved Rigel talks about children of the Holocaust being reborn. And how do they know they're reborn? Thousands of them have similar dreams of horrific circumstances that they were never taught by their parents, that they knew intrinsically. Some of them even were born to Gentile families who knew nothing of the Holocaust. And there was nothing in their background that could have told them what they had dreamed about. And their dreams were crystal clear about events and faces and individuals, all eventually discovered and put together by this wonderful author, Yocheved Rigler, who found thousands of like-minded people. She herself, I believe, also had these dreams, these recurring dreams of life in the Holocaust and death by those two-legged animals. And they were reborn in new lives, to create new lives, to create new goodness, to bring change into the world. They didn't die completely. They lived to live again. And that's, in a nutshell, what happened to the Bibas boys. The Bibas children will be, if they have to come back, will be born back again to bring light and life to the rest of us. But this brings to the idea of the Para Aduma. Para Aduma is meant to purify those that engaged in having contact with the dead. Most of the time, it's an extremely emotional, heartbreaking event. The loss of a loved one creates a hole in your heart, a shock to the system that you cannot recover from. And you mourn, and you weep, and you feel lonely, sometimes terrified in your loneliness. You mourn over the lack of connection to your loved one. You will not see that loved one again until we all go. And the person who is in this state of mind, this negative state of mind, understandably so, a person who's hurting, a person who's in a state of despair, a person who's longing for the touch of a loved one, a person who remembers or who was violated by someone intruding on them like it happened on October the 7th, and you're still hurting from it. And along comes the holiday of Pesach, which is coming up. And God says, go out, get sprinkled by the ashes of the Para Aduma, because you have to prepare for the holiday. How can I prepare for a holiday of joy when my heart is torn inside of me? God says, I want that torn heart corrected. I want you to become part of the joy of the Jewish holiday, the holiday of the people, all of the people. Personal mourning has to be put aside for the public celebration, for the public enjoyment of being Am HaNivcha, the special people. And that's the Chuka of the Para Aduma, to take the mourner, the one who's hurting the most, and by the sprinkling of the waters, those holy waters, you make the person ready to accept the holiday and to be in a state of joy. And this is inexplicable. How can a mourner suddenly become joyous? And we can't understand it, but that's the divine will, and that's what happens. We will be reconsoled, but until we become reconsoled by the Tchias HaMesim, the resurrection of the dead, of the Bibas children, and all those who were murdered, and all who were murdered in the Holocaust, and all the soldiers, and all the people that were ambushed, until they resurrect, we still have to accept the upcoming holiday, Pesach, in joy. And so God sprinkles some water with the ashes of the Para Aduma, spiritually, and says, I will allow you to transform yourself from the agony and pain to the ecstasy of Pesach, to be a free human being unencumbered by the limits of your emotion, unencumbered by the limits of your mind, unencumbered by the pressures of the outside world. You will become a free person ready to receive God Almighty, revealing God's self, not just in the holiday, but ultimately in that place in Jerusalem that we love, that place that's covered up by a despicable mosque, by a despicable golden domed entity that was placed there to express the victory of a vicious religion who has lost everything except those empty buildings. God will restore the Beis Hamikdash to us in our times.